briefly as I share with you guys the lesson I created with the title Environmental Justice in Data Science, an Overview and a Life Connection. My name is LaShawn Digbohou, and I am a sixth grade math teacher from Manchester Academic Charter School. And for our session agenda today, our kind of a roadmap of where we're going, I'm going to take a deep dive into the lesson that I created, give you guys a lot of details on what I did, and then I'll just kind of briefly talk about the planning process that I walked through, some of the challenges I faced, and then some of the lessons that I learned, as well as just a few reminders that I would consider as I move forward in my career. So when it comes to the lesson components, my lesson was broken into 2 days. The first day was for a 60-minute period of time, and then the second day was broken into two 60-minute periods, so one in the morning and one in the afternoon. So day one, the focus was just for students to understand in general what environmental justice is all about, so what it is and how they can relate to it and how I relate to it. And then I also made a brief connection to data and how the two connect. On day two, we kind of dove into environmental justice and what it means for our own homes and our communities, and our own additional connections. So I gave them an example of environmental justice in Hunts Point, which is in New York. I also gave a local example of Braddock, PA. And then we took a closer look at things. We took a deep dive into air pollution, as well as the students' opportunity to practice and work on a partner task that connected environmental justice and data science. So for day one lesson, I kind of hooked the students with a just quick word unscramble. So they had these letters and they had to unscramble the letters. Once they unscrambled them, it spelled out the word justice. And so just to help them understand the concept of justice and connect kind of their own meaning, I asked them to write down what they thought justice meant. And if they weren't sure, they could just give their best guess on what they felt that it meant. And I always have students kind of break things down in their own way, so they don't have to, come up with the definition from the dictionary or from someone that they heard. It could just be their own words that they're explaining. Then the students had a chance to turn and talk to their neighbor and tell their neighbor about their definition and their breakdown of justice. After that, I showed a short video, and I won't play the whole thing. I'll just play a portion of it. So this video just gives a quick overview of what environmental justice is. So I'll play that video now.
Environmental justice really reflects the fundamental reality that vulnerable communities are all too often subject to the disproportionate burden of pollution and contamination. At the end of the day, when we're talking about environmental impacts, at the heart of it are real people's lives. If you think about one child who's in her home that maybe has lead paint on the walls, she's drinking water from the tap that might have lead contamination in it. She plays in a playground that has arsenic in the soil and is developing asthma because of the polluting facilities next door. She goes into
So again, just a brief overview for the students to kind of see, what environmental justice is. After that, I asked them to kind of talk about their own connections to environmental justices and justices, in their environment. So they had to list ways that they saw that in their neighborhoods. And if they couldn't think of anything, or there wasn't anything that they knew of, they could just list some things that they heard from the video. So again, it was just a way for them to kind of talk and think about environmental injustices in their own neighborhood. After that, I kind of made my own connection, which, as I was working on this lesson and putting it together, I realized I had a lot more connections than I realized. So one connection was I thought about a movie that I watched growing up called Erin Brockovich with Julia Roberts. And so she was very instrumental in building a case against specific gas and electrical company involving groundwater contamination in a town in California. So I kind of just share with the students about that movie and that how that was kind of my connection in like gaining knowledge about environmental justice. I also have a friend that was a roommate in college. She studied she is an environmental engineer. And so I just talked about, her work in the industry and just, my experience with her as being her college roommate. The next thing that I shared with the students was a video on Robert Bullard, who is known as the father of environmental justice. So again, just another opportunity for them to, understand what environmental justice is and why it's important. After that, I share with the students the top 5 environmental issues in Western Pennsylvania today. So just an article I found, I don't remember what year it was published, but it walked through each of the 5 things that you see on the screen. So air pollution, land pollution, water pollution, climate change, and deforestation. So it gave them a chance to understand specifically what they are, what it is, and gave them visuals of like how it's impacting or can impact the community. So after they kind of had that overview, my next question that I posed to the students was, what would be their top 2 choices for what they would want to explore more in the city of Pittsburgh? By gaining that information, that allowed me to see for day 2, where do we want to kind of take a deeper dive as we're going forward with the lesson. And the specific area that they wanted to focus on was on air pollution. So we'll talk a little bit about that later on in this presentation about how we kind of dove into that. So next part of our lesson for day 1 was now that we had covered the environmental justice piece, we then focused on data. And so students had just an opportunity to think about, what is data? Where have they seen it or heard the word before? And, they have been exposed to data in previous years prior to 6th grade. But they also, this school year, had been doing a lot of data collection with their science teacher, and they were using that data to create different types of charts and to calculate mean, median, mode, and range. And so they did have some exposure to data, so they were able to make that connection at this point in the lesson. And so the next question to them was, well, how do you think we would connect environmental justice and data? How do those 2 things relate? So we kind of had a quick chat about that. And so as you can see on the screen, one of the questions that was posed to them was a quote, and I'll just read the quick quote. It says, I'll read the quote quickly. It says, until you have actual numbers to hang your hat on, it's hard to understand the magnitude of this problem. And this is from James Babisaic, a toxicologist at the University of Pittsburgh Graduate School of Public Health. We wanted to be able to start having a conversation about how many deaths from air pollution in these neighborhoods are too many. So we kind of just began to talk about, with the importance of data when it comes to environmental justice. The next thing students had a chance to do was to dive into some data. And so during our professional development session, as a part of this grant, we had many exposures to different pieces of information. And one of them was the Citizen Science Interactive. So I'll show that to you guys now. So it's a website that has many different ways of collecting data in different areas. So the students had a chance to, and I'll just go to one of them really quickly. So you can see it's sorted by bar graphs, line graphs, box plots, scatter plots, and maps. And so this specific one is about storm episodes by state. And students are given information and they have a set of questions that they have to answer. So the students for this class, we kind of took a look at this, we answered the questions, and then after they were done with that, I gave them some time to just explore the website on their own. So that's one of the other things that we did on day 1 of our time together. On day 2, it was really focused on, kind of making some more connections to things that I was familiar with, as well as things in their own communities. And so something else that kind of came back to mind as I was preparing for the lesson was my brother-in-law, who created a movie probably over 20 years ago. And it talked about the area that he grew up in, which was Hunts Point, which is located in the South Bronx, and how the trucks that would come in and out of the community, how it impacted the children. So I'll just kind of read kind of what I share with the students on day 2. So it says, Hunts Point is located in the South Bronx. There are an estimated 11,000 families that live there. A major health concern in Hunts Point is the number of children diagnosed with asthma. There are 18 waste transfer stations, 40% of New York sewage, 100% of Bronx waste, a sewage treatment plant, a sewage pelletizing plant, 4 electrical power plants, and more than 60,000 trucks per week. Though Hunts Point community faces many inequities, I focus on issues of poor air quality. And so that's what he kind of shared in his movie. So the name of the movie is Raising the Point, and it's a unique grassroots effort to support Hunts Point's mission in revitalizing the community. As a professor of education, I would like to show that there are critical factors that affect the student's educational experience before they even walk through the school's door. Since the majority of school absenteeism is related to asthma, giving a student an enriching educational experience in a community overcome by heavy truck idling is an injustice that requires action. I'm sorry, that wasn't, I said it was 20 years ago. It looks like it was more like 12 years ago. So in this video, Raising the Point, I think the video is probably about 20 minutes long or so. And I just showed the students about 5 minutes of that video so that they could see a specific, connection to me of how, there's issues of the environment that can, that impacted this specific community. The next thing that I did was I kind of brought it back to Pittsburgh. And we do have students in our classrooms that live in Braddock, PA. And so this was a great connection for them. And even if they didn't live there, many students are familiar with the city and the town of Braddock. So showed them a quick video of how there were some environmental impacts and environmental injustices in Braddock. Another part of our day 2 was what I had mentioned before. So the students wanted to take that deeper dive into the concept of air pollution. So they received a copy of this map. So this is a 2000 census tract percent minority and plants emitting criteria air pollutants. So they had a chance to, kind of just kick it off with an overall understanding of what the map is showing. And then I created a Google form that they had to go through and answer some specific questions. The other thing that they did on day 2, and they did this in the afternoon, was they had a chance to look at different types of data charts and work with a partner to answer questions. So the link, I'll just click on it very quickly. This is from Teaching Tolerance, and they had a whole full-blown lesson on, analyzing environmental justice. And I specifically took where it says the handout of the 4 graphs. So I took each of those 4 graphs and students had a chance to answer questions on those graphs. Once they answered the questions, they came up with their partner and kind of just talked about the map and what it showed. And they had a chance to also, just kind of share out some of the questions that were on the sheet. They didn't have to talk about everything on the sheet, but just a couple of the items. So this was a chance for students to, take a look at a specific environmental injustice and then, kind of share out what they learned. So that was pretty much the end of the lesson on day 2, which kind of just closed out our talk or our experience with the environmental justice and data science. But just wanted to kind of walk you through the planning process that I followed as I created the lesson. So the first thing I wanted to do was just to kind of decide what was going to be the objective and what was going to be the goal in mind, because there's so many angles that I could have gone with this. And so I decided that I just wanted to give the students an overview of how we can connect data science to environmental justice, as well as, first and foremost, for them to understand, what is environmental justice, and also try to make some connections to their communities and, to things that I could relate to. So that was kind of the objective or goal that I had in mind. And so once I kind of decided where I was going to go, I then kind of just looked at what resources were available. So as I mentioned before, we had a professional development session that gave us a plethora of things that we could use. So I just had to decide from that toolbox of items, what I was going to use, as well as just doing some additional research online, using the connection of my friend from college and just, picking her brain on, how I could approach it. So just, pulling those resources and deciding like how that was going to meet my goal of, just giving the students an overview of the topic. And then as I, kind of pinpointed and decided on what resources I was going to use, what activities I was going to do, I wanted to think about how I would engage the students. You can kind of see throughout my presentation that we did some turn and talks. They did some presentations. They had opportunities to kind of do some things technology wise with, looking at the different things on the screen, playing with the citizen science interactive. So I then thought about, how am I going to engage my learners in this content? So that was kind of my planning process as I put together the lesson. The next thing I want to talk about is the challenges and changes. So the challenges, there's two that I'll share. And one of them that kind of often is a challenge for me is deciding what I'm going to use now. As I mentioned before, there's so many things that I could have used. So it was just a matter of picking and choosing what I was going to use for that specific lesson that we were working on. And then the other challenge was after our first, or after one of our professional development sessions, we had an opportunity to brainstorm with other educators from our schools and in our grade levels to kind of talk about what we could do moving forward as far as execution of a lesson. And we came up with this great idea, but what I had to really, what I was challenged with was how realistic were those expectations as far as the time that I had in the current skill set of the student. So because the time was pretty limited, like I said, I only blocked out 2 days for the lessons. We were going to do a website, but I knew that it would take a lot of time to, teach the students the coding piece of it and, gathering the data. So I just knowing that their skill set wasn't there yet to really just dive in. It was a challenge to kind of say, well, hey, we need to hold tight on that and then maybe use that later. So that was two of the challenges that I kind of faced. Some of the changes that I would make as I think about implementing this lesson in the future is just to add a parent engagement piece of the puzzle. Again, as I was, trying to get the students to relate to their own environmental justices, I think, just having them have like a quick homework assignment where they're just asking parents maybe about the 5 issues that were the top issues in PA, Western PA, and maybe just having the students, talk to their parents about where they've experienced this or how they've seen this, or, what did they experience growing up, or what did their parents experience as far as their parents, their grandparents. So that was one change that I would make. And then something else that came to mind was also maybe have the students do more of the heavy lifting is what I call it. So that day 2 in the afternoon where they were analyzing the charts and coming up with, answering those questions, maybe they could find their own charts to pick and come up with their own questions, and maybe have it be something where the students would then ask, another student or another group the questions and that they came up with. So that was another change that I would consider making going forward. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the lessons that I've learned, or, kind of my reminders that I would consider again as I move forward. So one of the lessons learned is that this is not just a one-time thing. Like I said, for the school year, I only took 2 days to kind of focus on it. But this is something that could be done and infused throughout the entire school year. And, maybe it could be like an environmental justice and data science day, once a month, pick up, first day of the month or first Monday of the month, and that just be the day that we kind of focus on this topic. As I was just kind of debriefing on my experience with the program, and I was going through and thinking about some of the 6th grade math content, there were so many, like just through a quick brainstorm of ideas of things that could easily be tied to environmental justice and data science that could easily be connected to, what the students learn in 6th grade math. The other lesson learned, a reminder that I wanted to share was that this content or subject can be used as a great way to spiral through different content. So as I showed on the screen from the Citizen Science Interactive, there were so many different types of graphs and ways to collect data. So whether it's the box plot or the scatter plot, and it's a good way to have students spiral through the content. So, maybe one day it is working on scatter plots and understanding the scatter plots, and then they can kind of, learn that idea in one space, but like use the environmental justice as a way to spiral back through it. So yeah, I just another lesson learned that I kind of wanted to have as a reminder for myself. And the last reminder is that, you know, I think it's very important as educators that we try to expose our students to as much as possible, just so they can make informed decisions about their future. And that's one of the reasons why I got into this field, because I want, you know, students to have exposure and have knowledge. And so if they don't know something, they wouldn't even know if they're interested in it. So the fact that they had this opportunity to be exposed to environmental justice and data science and that connection could have sparked something that may lead to their career or even lead to them wanting to take some action in the future. So just a reminder that, you know, the importance of the lesson and just that reminder to like try to infuse it into like spiral it through throughout the school year. So those are my 3 lessons learned, and that's pretty much all I have. So thanks for listening. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. My email is on the screen, and I'll be more than happy to help. Have a good day.